Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are resuming our weekly Shanti in Place meditation series, and we're so delighted that you could join us. We'll give it another minute or so, perhaps for folks to make their way into the room, and then we will begin, as we generally do, with our meditation practice. And following that practice, we will have some discussion on a principle of yoga philosophy. So as we prepare for our practice, I just want to invite everyone, if you haven't already done so, please take a moment to find a comfortable seat, a comfortable posture, whatever that means for you. Some folks like to sit in chairs, and that's absolutely fine. Others may feel more comfortable on the floor, on a rug, or on a meditation pillow. The main principle is just whatever allows you to be comfortable, focused, and present. So hopefully we've all found that comfortable seat for ourselves. I want to invite everyone to just take that moment or two to ground yourself in your seat with intention. For some of us, this may mean um, bringing our awareness to the way that our feet or our shoes are making contact with the ground below, or perhaps bringing our awareness to and noticing how our sit bones, our seat, the base of our spine are making contact with the meditation pillow or the ground or our chairs, and just giving ourselves some permission to adjust or readjust. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and close your eyes, or perhaps half close your eyes or soften your gaze if that's more comfortable for you. We will begin our meditation with 3 deep breaths together, inhaling through the nose, holding for a few moments, and then exhaling either through the nose or out through the lips with a soft sigh. Let's take our nice deep breath together, breathing in and out. Again, and out. Last breath in holding and release. Now allowing our breath to resume its natural, organic rhythm. Just allowing our breath to find its own flow. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And as our breath finds its rhythm, just bringing our awareness to that rhythm. bringing our awareness to the breath. Noticing now the sensation of breathing, the texture or perhaps temperature of the air as it's taken in through the nostrils, and the texture and temperature and feeling of the breath as it leaves the nostrils or the mouth. Simply noticing. This breath is our anchor, it's our foundation, it's a place of stability and safety that we can always return to. It's the most natural thing that we do, the most amazing and yet effortless act that we perform. Keeping the awareness on the breath and gently noticing the physical body, any sensations that we're feeling with the body. Noticing perhaps any area of discomfort or tension or tightness in the body. And adjusting or softening if we're able to. Or simply noticing and accepting it as the experience of our body in this moment. Recognizing perhaps that there's so very little that we can change or control or manipulate when we simply notice the breath. Noticing now our mind, where our minds may be going, noticing the texture of our thoughts. If particular thoughts are arising, we can observe them without judgment. Noticing perhaps the tendency of our thoughts to travel into the past or to jump forward into the future. Noticing the textures of remembering or pining or lamenting, the textures of anticipation or perhaps even anxiety, and gently, lovingly bringing the mind back to this moment, to this breath. Recognizing perhaps that in this moment there is nowhere else we need to be. There is nothing else we need to do. There is no other identity that we need to accept. In this moment, we are simply observers. We are simply being. We are simply breathing. Checking in with the breath, with the anchor. Inviting our restless, flickering, overactive minds to simply rest on this breath. To simply rest on this breath. Bringing our practice now to a close. We'll inhale deeply, hold the breath for a few moments, and then release the breath, chanting or perhaps listening to the chant of the sacred syllable Om, the sound vibration that embodies eternality, infinite possibility, fullness and completeness. Breathing in deeply through the nose. Gently and with ease, opening our eyes if we have them closed, or widening our gaze, returning our awareness to our gathering. Thank you for your presence and for your openness to this practice. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can reflect on a really beautiful principle or foundation of meditation practice, of yoga practice, the idea of alignment. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. As we've talked about in the past, these Shanti in place meditations are opportunities, if we'd like to make a shift from thinking about peace as a state of place, as existing and tied in to our external surroundings and circumstances. And certainly our external surroundings and circumstances are part of or can contribute to feelings of calm and of peace and of groundedness and perspective. But when we're honest with ourselves, we also recognize that as far as the external world goes, there's so little that we have control over. And we particularly recognize that at times like this, where whether it's a pandemic or political situations, unrest, anxiety in so many different ways, there's so little that we can control in that external world outside of us, or perhaps our immediate sphere of influence. And yet this is the sphere, this external world is the sphere that we're constantly tempted to try to change, and that we're constantly facing frustration when we're unable to change. But Shanti in place is about making a shift. It's shifting from peace as a state of place in the external world to peace as a state of mind in the internal realm. And this we recognize is largely within our control, although often we're daunted, or we're challenged to try to change that. And these principles that we've been reflecting on, for those of you who have been able to join in the past, these principles are ways by which we can lean into this idea of peace as a state of mind, where we can try to work on the things that we can change. One of these principles that's so important in meditation practice is alignment, or in Sanskrit, what's called yojana. And those of you who have an asana practice, a physical yoga posture practice, you are probably not a stranger to this idea of alignment. In fact, in one sense, it might even be said that yoga asana practice is all about alignment, that all the different asanas are designed to really bring us into greater and greater states of alignment. In the same way, when it comes to meditation practice or mindfulness, we can think about this principle of alignment as being really what's at the heart or at the root of our practice. And I'd like to suggest that we can think about alignment on three levels. We're going to focus on one of the levels in our few minutes of discussion here today. But we can think about alignment on the level of the body, or the body and senses, with the breath. And so even in our physical yoga practice, for those of us who do have that practice, you'll notice that without breathing, without tuning into breath, we can't really sustain a state of alignment with our postures. So there's this connection between the body and the breath. And the more we can tune into that connection, the more we're exercising yojana, or alignment. This is one of the reasons why when we're in a high stress situation, for instance, and we feel some tension, some anxiety within the body, that we're advised to go back to the breath, to take a deep breath in, right? Even children are advised, because just by connecting to the breath, something as simple as not even manipulating the breath, but just noticing the breath, as we were trying to do in our practice, it brings the body and senses to a place of greater stability and greater strength. And in the same way, that breath helps us to align our mind. And here I want to use the mind. I want to split our idea of the mind into two categories, into the reactive mind and the discerning mind, or in Sanskrit, what's called the manas and the buddhi. So some of you are familiar with these terms. In yoga philosophy, the mind is understood to be both the reactive mind, the manas, and we'll talk about that in a bit, and the discerning mind, or the buddhi. And it's the relationship between the two, or the alignment between the two, that really determines, in one sense, our state of mind. So when we talk about state of mind, we're really talking about, is there a state of alignment between the buddhi and the manas? Or is that alignment off? Is there a break, a dissonance? To the extent that there's a break in the alignment, we're going to experience discomfort. We're going to experience anxiety. We're going to experience a lack of presence. To the extent that there's alignment between the manas and the buddhi, especially through the power of the breath. So breath work helps us to bring the manas and buddhi into greater alignment. To that extent, we will be able to experience ease, to experience comfort, to experience, to experience shanti, to experience peace. And on the ultimate level, we're not going to talk so much about this, but on the ultimate level, or we can say the deepest level, alignment is meant to bring even the mind, even the discerning mind, into connection or into alignment with the observing self. That observing self, in Sanskrit, this is called the Atman, or sometimes the Purusha. This Atman or Purusha, this drashtu, this observer, this witness, that is who we actually are. If you'll notice in the meditation practice, we can observe our breath, we can observe our body, we can observe the sensations, the textures, the feelings, we can observe our thoughts, we can observe our breath, we can observe all of these things. That begs the question, who is the observer that's doing all of that? And that observer, that's who we actually are. That's our truest identity. And in these embodied states, we are connected to. And so in one sense, we are our bodies, our senses, our mind, our breath, our thoughts. We are all of this in our embodied state. And in our pure state, we are simply that observing self. There's a wonderful teaching in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter of the Gita, where Sri Krishna advises Arjuna to bring the mind back from where it wanders. He says, Yato yato nischalati manas chanchalam asthiram tatastato niyam yated atmaneva vasam nayet. From wherever the flickering and unsteady mind wanders, one can certainly restrain it and bring it back under the control of the self. So this is the practice of yojana. This is the practice of alignment. When we notice that there is misalignment, when we notice that the manas is overpowering the buddhi, then what do? We simply bring the manas back. Reality exists in this present moment. We talk so much in yoga philosophy and in meditation about being present. And if we think about it and we reflect on it for a moment, this present moment actually is reality. The moments that came before exist, certainly, but they exist in a manasic state. They exist as thought patterns. The moments themselves are gone for all intents and purposes. What remains is the thought patterns of those moments, what we call memories. And likewise, the existence of the future, yes, the future exists, but right now the future exists in an unmanifested state. And again, in this manasic state, there are thought patterns of the future. Whether those thought patterns take the form of excitement and hope and anticipation, or anxiety, fear, dread, whatever texture there may be, the moments that are yet to happen exist only as thought patterns. So if the moments of the past exist as thought patterns, and the moments of the future exist as thought patterns, what the moments we are in right now are sat, are existence right now. So in one sense, we can say the past and the future are both states of mental conceptions. The present moment is a state of reality. If that's true, if we can accept that even theoretically, then what that means is our ability to be present to this moment is our ability to be present to reality. So how do we do that? Well, again, we do that by discerning. The very first thing we do is we discern the reactive mind from the discerning mind, right? It seems almost like a catch-22 because you need discernment to be able to recognize that there is a discerning mind. If we're not practicing discernment, it's all just going to be one big jumble, and we might just think about our mind as just this sort of amorphous entity. But when we're able to, through practice, when we're able to distinguish between the buddhi and the manas, then we're able to recognize that the buddhi and manas actually have different functions. That the buddhi is meant to be um, that force which guides and directs, and we might, to use an analogy, that parents the manas. If the manas is like a child, as it often is, then the buddhi is like the parent of the child. Sometimes we see a situation where a parent is not really, for whatever reason, fulfilling their role, and the child is running around everywhere. It doesn't mean that the child is bad. It doesn't mean that the child is should be condemned or judged or treated harshly, but it simply means that there is a dysfunction in that relationship, that the parent is somehow abdicating their role as the force that is to guide, to nurture, to protect. But when a parent is doing that parent's job, when the parent is fulfilling their responsibility, then they know that there are times to allow their child to run around and to explore and to be curious, but there are also times to rein that child in. So imagine taking a small child to a grocery store, for instance. I know many of us are doing our grocery shopping virtually, online, curbside delivery, and all this stuff. But imagine those days when we were taking our children into the grocery store. We can take that child into the grocery store, and the child immediately sees something that she likes. She sees a display with some chocolate, some candy. So she runs to those chocolates. As the parent, we understand that. We may even sympathize. But as the parent, we can very patiently, very kindly, but also very intelligently bring that child back to the task at hand, right? We don't simply give in to the child. Now, we may recognize there are times to treat the child or to give the child a little bit more leeway, and those opportunities are there. But as a parent, what we're doing mainly is we're helping our child, again, in a patient, kind, and loving way. We're helping the child to not lose focus, to not become distracted and diverted in so many ways. And so also with our practice, right, what are we doing? We are realigning that relationship between manas and buddhi. We're re-empowering the buddhi to be that loving parent that guides the childlike manas back. When the manas wants to jump into the past and wants to bring us into that state of existing in the past, of lamenting or pining or remembering, that's natural. But if we get stuck there, we're outside of the moment. We're outside of reality again. We're stuck in our minds. And so, like a parent, the buddhi recognizes that and then brings the manas back. Or if the manas wants to take us into the future and have us be overruled and controlled by anxiety or by expectation, the buddhi very gently brings the manas back. And so when we sit in a meditation practice, this is what we're doing. In one sense, we are building or rebuilding that muscle memory. We've been out of alignment for so long that we've perhaps forgotten what it feels like. And so when we sit in meditation practice, what are we doing? We're reforming those patterns, those healthy patterns and habits of alignment. We're rebuilding that muscle memory so that when we're sitting in practice, we can learn to bring our wandering, flickering, Krishna says it's flickering and obstinate. We can bring our flickering, restless, obstinate mind back to the present moment. We can do that in practice. And the idea is the more we are able to do that in practice, the more we're able to build that muscle memory, the more we will be able to do that when we are in any situation. So when we're on the meditation pillow or on the yoga mat, the more we practice doing that, the more it will manifest and become our natural default, our natural position of healthy alignment when we're off the mat or off the pillow. This requires commitment, consistency, and intention. But this is why we have a practice to help us to embrace that commitment, that consistency, and that intention. And so I want to invite us as a takeaway, take a moment or two, take a little bit of time, set aside, just a couple of minutes. It doesn't need to take, you don't need to take too long to do this. But at some point this week, I want to invite you, take some time to think about your relationship with alignment, to think about some strategies. If you find your mind wandering in a meditation practice, if you have one, or yoga practice, or in any activity, even during your day, even during your work, if you find yourself really challenged in this way where the manas seems to be really kind of calling the shots, and the buddhi is kind of like an absent parent or an overrun parent by an overactive manas. Again, we don't have to beat ourselves up about it. We don't have to judge ourselves harshly or condemn ourselves. But this is an opportunity right now. Whatever happened in the past may have happened. Whatever relationship we've had with the manas, that's there in the past. But right now, in this moment, what kind of relationship do we want to have between the buddhi and the manas? And what are some practical strategies or tips that we can take shelter of and we can put into practice in our own lives to strengthen the buddhi and bring that manas a little bit more into that proper state of alignment with the buddhi? So we'll leave it there. And again, I recognize that some folks may need to go, and that's absolutely fine, but I want to leave some time for any questions or reflections or shares that anyone might have. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like, and just share your question or just let us know how you're feeling or what you're reflecting on in this moment.
Hi, Vineet. And hi, everyone. Thanks for starting Shanti, first of all. Really appreciate it. My question is about breath. It seems like it's a very common anchoring point, right? To bring attention to presence in asana practice too. As you mentioned, I was wondering, is there any other ways people use in this tradition, to bring attention back to presence? Or I think breath is very common, but I was just curious, is there any way people are also practicing?
Thank you, Sina. That's a beautiful question. So as you observed, breath seems to be the most common. And I think there's different reasons for that. And I've come across some of that in my reading, but I'm sure others have come across similar things where, for one thing, the breath is very intimately connected to life, right? In one sense, breath is what is the first thing that we do in life, and breath is, not to be morbid, but it is, to be realistic. Breath will be the last thing that we do for all intents and purposes, right? When breath leaves us. So breath is just so foundational to life that I think that's one reason perhaps that it makes sense for that to be an anchoring point, something that's so intrinsic and so universal and so essential to who we are. Breath, as we know it, kind of, inhaling and exhaling, and that is, in one sense, the physical manifestation or the more gross manifestation of a more subtle force called prana. So some of us have a connection to prana yoga shala. So prana it's breath, but it's breath in a more subtle way. It's kind of an energetic manifestation of breath, but there's a relationship. So in one sense, by focusing on breath, we're also, even if we're doing it in a way that's simply observing our natural breath, it brings us a little bit closer to an understanding of or a connection with prana. So I think that's another reason. It's natural, right? There's a natural rhythm to it. There's a natural flow to it. So it allows us to focus on something without, right? It's not that we're thinking about breath. And in fact, if we find ourselves thinking about breath, then we may need to again pull back and bring bring the manas more to a place of simply observing the breath. So it's natural to observe. Having said that, I'll just say I'll just add a kind of a quick sort of addition to breath. So you asked about other practices. So you'll find breath is most common, but similarly with breath, the other one that at least in the classical yoga and meditation texts that comes up, and Patanjali brings this up in the Yoga Sutras as well, is mantra, is sacred sound vibration, and particularly in more devotional or theistic traditions, it is sound that is connected to the divine. So names or qualities or um, just some sound connection to the divine, whether that's a particular name of the divine or a mantra, as in like a prayer. And so Patanjali says that like the breath, this is natural to us, it's essential, it's universal. But the added benefit of mantra is it connects us to divinity in a devotional, relational way, and in a way that kind of breath doesn't do that. So it has this other quality to it as well. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
A question over chat that's privately sent to me that is asking for strategies for when there is a more severe lack of alignment, for instance, during anxiety or panic attacks. It's a great question. And I'm so glad you're asking this question because I want to be very careful that we don't take this idea of alignment within sort of meditation practice as a cure-all and as a substitute for seeking, when it's needed, seeking medical intervention, seeking psychiatric or psychological interventions. Alignment, as we're speaking about it, is meant to complement, not to replace these other modalities as they're needed. So I want to make that really, really clear. And that includes things even like medication. So if someone is on, a prescribed medication to deal with or to help to manage anxiety, we shouldn't think of alignment through meditation practice as a substitute for that or as an alternative for that. Having said that, I think that alignment can be a very powerful practice to tap into, um, even during these very acute episodes of anxiety or panic. And again, it has to do with, and there's different strategies for this, but it has to do with refocusing, getting that ground again. So the breath helps us to get ground. I know some folks who struggle with anxiety and panic attacks and talk about um, their own strategies. Some of the things I've heard involve um, what we might call kind of radical awareness or radical mindfulness. So, for instance, um, choosing and listing out either verbally or mentally um, four, four things of a certain color in the room that we're in, or or noticing, three sounds that I hear, right? So tapping into even the sensory, tapping into that which we can connect to most readily, but to bring us again into a state of more mindfulness. It's not exactly the same thing as the kind of meditation practice that we do or that we've done together, but the objective is similar in that it especially when the manas is in a state of being kind of um, how shall we say, being kind of in an overdrive state, it can remove that edge and bring that manas into more of a grounded state. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. I think I don't want to speak out of turn because I think there is from what I understand, there is a great, there's a lot of resources specifically around anxiety and panic. And I think especially if that's something that is an issue for us, we need to avail ourselves of that and really kind of go to the experts on those subject matters. But I think they can be very much complemented by and enhanced through regular meditation practice. Wonderful. Okay, well, I don't want to hold us too long, but thank you so much. And just a reminder again, we will meet on Mondays at noon. So, of course, you all got the memo, but if you know of others who would like to share in this practice and who are available on Mondays at noon, please do pass the word along to them. Unfortunately, we're no longer able to meet on Tuesdays, but hopefully this works for folks as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Please do reflect on this idea of yojana and alignment as you're able to. And we will see you next week, next Monday, for another Shanti in Place gathering. Thanks so much. Take care.